Hi, folks. I'd like to welcome you to the Julie Rowe Show today. This is our second podcast recording. Bear with us as we get used to this system and try to get a few things figured out. I'd like to welcome our guest today. We have my friend Brandon on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Brandon. Good to hear from you.
You too.
Yeah, and we also have Eric here who's guiding some of the conversations with us. I'd like to thank him for his work. How you doing, Eric?
Doing great.
Great. This being our second podcast and the first time that we're doing a three-way call, we are branching out into new horizons here, so we thank you for your patience and understanding as we try to figure out the audio and other things with the system as we go along. We anticipate that these podcasts will be easier to do and will run more smoothly as time goes on after we have a little bit of practice. So we will try really hard not to talk over each other, and I'm going to try hard not to dominate the conversation too much because that first podcast, I felt like the energy was strong and bold, but every podcast will be a little bit different depending on the topic that we talk about today. What I've done is open it up to Brandon for his questions today and the topic of his choice. As mentioned in the first podcast, I prefer not to really know what the topics are going to be or the questions so that I can essentially have live stream from the other side of the veil as I receive personal revelation as to what the Lord would have me say. So having said that, Brandon, I want to turn the time over to you for a few minutes and ask you what your topic selection is for today.
Okay, well, we know that our God is a God of intelligence and that there's many meanings to that, but that also means that he is a God of science, and I would even say probably the perfect scientist. We understand that eventually all truth will be circumscribed into one greater whole, and the religion, true faith and true science will one day intersect. And so it was kind of along those lines that I wanted to ask you a few questions regarding the cosmos. Joseph Smith hinted a lot about the cosmos in his life, at how the significance of our faith goes far beyond our human understanding. And in the book of Moses, we get a glimpse of, there's only a few times in the scriptures where God hints at the vastness of creation. He talks about there being multiple Eves and multiple Adams, but only an account of this world give I unto you, as far as Moses goes. But anyways, the reason why I wanted to get into this is because we have some very interesting events coming up related to not only a solar eclipse that's very significant in September, but also the planets, the alignment of the planets, and some of the stars, some constellations, as well as planetary movements that are very significant, specifically with regards to the New Testament and some information there. But what, as far as your understanding of what somebody might gaze up into the sky and see this, and this late summer, what can you just for my curiosity, what can you add to that?
Okay. Brandon, I love this topic. I love science, and I love what you have shared with us already. One of the reasons I love this topic is because we are on the cusp of some new changes coming into our universe, into our planet, and around our planet. And I first want to say that with my dad being in the military and moving around, the way it worked for me with my earth science classes and physical science classes when I was growing up, I think I am the only one of my siblings that never took a class that studied the stars. Just because when we moved in middle school and high school, when I normally would have studied those, they studied the 1 year that I was to take it in my school, I moved, and then when I moved to the new school, they had that same class in the year previous, and so I never actually got a class on any of that growing up, although I was always fascinated by it. So I don't have a scientific background in the secular methods on this. Everything that you hear me say has been taught to me either through my NDEs or through Dream and Vision, with the exception of a little bit online, but even that I would say it's less than than 3 hours of anything I've ever read online regarding some of this stuff or heard online. I've done that purposely because one, I'm really busy, and two, because I prefer to get my education directly from the source. I guess if I were not getting that information, I would go study it on my own, but because they've taught it to me through Dream and Vision, it is limited because I haven't expounded upon that. So I am not one that can look up into the stars and tell you anything other than the Big Dipper, basically. If I were to look at the stars, I could not tell you the names of the constellations. I couldn't tell you the names of the planets that are passing by or any of that. I can recognize a lunar eclipse. I can recognize the phases of the moon. When I got my teaching degree and I was teaching in school, I just for one semester when I did my student teaching for fourth graders, we studied the moon phases, and I taught it. So, but quite honestly, most of what you'll hear today is directly from revelation I've been given from the Lord. And I think it's fascinating that this lunar eclipse that's coming up and the alignment of the planets, from what the Spirit is telling me, directly ties into my mission and to the mission of the gathering as far as signs of the time. As we go along, Eric has done volume 1 of my biography, and in about 3 or 4 years we plan on releasing volume 2, which will explain more of my mission and why I am telling people this right now, that stars aligning tie into my mission specifically. One of the things I find fascinating, and we introduced this in the book, but you don't know that, Brandon, because you haven't read the book yet.
That's true.
so this is fascinating to me that you're asking these questions right now, and yet you don't know that Eric and I have, in one of the chapters, introduced what's coming in the fall. Right, Eric?
Oh, wow.
That's it.
Right. And with that, Eric briefly hints at the fact that my mission is tied in. For example, the lunar eclipse is supposed to come through Rexburg, Idaho around August 21st. My NDE was September 28th and 29th. The blood moon lunar eclipse that happened in 2015, which I never discussed, although I got a bad rap for discussing, and now I can discuss, happened on the 27th to the 28th of September, right at the reunion of my 11th year for my 2004 NDE. On that 11th anniversary, I went into another near-death experience, and I was in bed sick for about 5 days, just under a week, but 5 days very seriously. Wow. During that time, from the other side of the veil, as they were teaching me, what I heard was that I was coming full circle, and that this was the 11th anniversary of my NDE. We were in the 11th hour. We hear about that in the scriptures, don't we?
Yeah,
right?
That's very significant. That's, absolutely right.
Right.
Wow.
So on my 11th anniversary of my NDE, my helpers from the other side, I don't know how to say it because I don't want to go into too much detail on that as to how I get that revelation, but those from the other side, the Lord's messengers from the other side, let me know that all would be well. Excuse me, I would be okay. That that particular sickness would not last much longer, and I was given a priesthood blessing and some other healing to help me recover from that NDE. And I heard we are in the 11th hour, Julie. This is essentially just around the corner as we go into the 12th hour signifying the return of the Savior. And I heard that we were in, essentially like if you were to talk about a baseball game, we were in the bottom of the eighth inning. And that when we got to the bottom of the 9th inning, we would be entering the tribulations. Entering the bottom of the 9th, being the end of the baseball game, if you will, symbolically speaking, we would be entering the tribulations. As it ties into this mission with the stars aligning, the planets aligning, in September of 2017, 13 planets will align for the first time in 7,000 years, according to astrologists. And I think that is fascinating. And according to astronomers, you've got the two different studies there. And anyone that wants to learn more about that, can Google and learn about Revelation 12 and the prophecies there that have been revealed for thousands of years, written in Revelations, also in Isaiah, but specifically John the Beloved, John the Revelator, who is the same John that is in my book, and I am now coming coupled with that. John the Revelator wrote about these planets aligning, and he discussed this in Revelations 12. That prophecy is going to, the beginning of fulfillment of that prophecy will happen this September, beginning in August, coming to fulfillment in September as we lead out with the planets aligning. I think it's fascinating.
Oh boy, yeah, the crown of 12 stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I'll also take note, I think it's amazing, that the week that these planets align, or close after that, the week after, marks the 13th anniversary of my NDE. I think the Lord is fascinating with his math. 13 years for my NDE and 13 planets aligning. I don't know. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but I've heard that nothing's coincidental, and I think it's absolutely fascinating, the math and the science related to what we're seeing going on the Earth. I think it's terrific.
Wow. Well, that's definitely a witness to me, and I can say that the Lord usually teaches us in ways that we can understand, and then when we recognize something one place and it reoccurs in other places, it's something to pay attention to.
Right.
You mentioned 13 planets. Can you shed light on what that is? I think everybody knows, Mercury all the way out to Pluto, and I guess there's some debate whether Pluto's really a planet or not anymore, but
right.
What would the 13 planets be, and are those even a part of our solar system, and can you enlighten us as to what that looks like?
In all truthfulness, I have not studied this. So they've shown it to me in night vision, but I don't have clarity as to what they are. Although I see them lining up, that's an area that I need to study more. I do know that coming down the pipeline later on, tied to this, but separately, is Planet X. I believe is it Nibiru? Is that how you say it? I can't even pronounce it. Nibiru. That'll tell people how limited I am in my understanding of physical science related to what people on Earth are talking about. I've only watched one documentary on that, and there are other planets that are coming into our solar system and into around the Earth that are having effects, and you can see those as you look into the skies at different times that are affecting our weather and other things. So whether they're counting those or not, I don't know. I have not done research on this. I just know that in night vision, I have been told more than once on several occasions that my mission ties in with this. They've explained to me a little bit of how it's tied in, but not in full measure. And then they have shown me Earth and the planets aligning, and they've shown it to me as if it's in real time and then like sped up. And then they've brought it and they've given me lessons on creation and other things. The first time I saw that was during my NDE, as far as lessons, if you will, on the creation. But my understanding is what they did was they just reminded me of the lessons I had premortally before I ever came to Earth. We've all had these science lessons, we've all had these math lessons, we've all had these creation lessons before we ever got a body and we came to Earth. And when I had my NDE, they simply reminded me of what I had already been taught because I didn't have the veil, and they just reminded me of what was coming. So they showed me the creation, and then they showed, as far as our Earth and some of the other planets, and then they showed me through time, because time and space are different, right? When you're not in our sphere, when you're not in this area of the world, and you're in a different realm or sphere. And so when I was on the other side in spirit, then they showed me the past, present, and future. And so I have memories, if you will, of other worlds, of other galaxies, of other solar systems, and I have traveled to some of those places while I was in my NDE, although I don't talk about those in the book, and this is the first time I'm talking about it publicly to my knowledge, because people have a hard time believing that I would even travel on this Earth or have experiences here, and It just makes me look weird. It just makes me look really weird if I start talking about intergalactic travel and stuff like that in spirit. So I usually try not to say much about that, but as we get closer to these planets aligning and the things changing and the signs in the heavens and my mission coming to fulfillment, I think it's important people know that there's, I think the verbiage that's been given to me is kind of like a time-space overlap when we go into millennium. That's not exactly how it's going to be, but that's the best human verbiage that I can come up with that they've given me to explain how time is kept in the eternities. There's a time-space overlap.
So if I'm understanding kind of what you're talking about, like we know that, so we've heard it said, right? We've heard it said that 1,000 years on Earth is a day in God's time, and you know, we're understanding that to be Kolob where He is. So, and there's probably more to it than what we realize, but we think 1,000 years here, a day in Kolob, and there's probably more to it than that. In fact, time seems to be a construct of man, not so much of God. Right. Whereas God is not bound by time, and that's hard to think about because the only thing that we know about God's time is one eternal round. And all I get in my head is a circle or a loop, you know, or and there's obviously more to that. Or you could take it as a sphere, and there's, you know, science is now just discovering that there's more than 10 dimensions, and you know, looking at God, seeing every dimension that there ever is, or ever was, or ever will be. Right. How many is He looking at? But anyway, before I get carried off track, I was just thinking. So when the millennial state comes, so basically what I'm gathering from what you're saying is that there will be a time shift of sorts. That maybe time will feel like it always has to us, but it may or may not be accelerated, decelerated, or maybe perhaps depending on even where you are on the Earth, because we know that Zion will spread out from Jackson County, Missouri, and that time may actually be different as those that are in Zion living in a terrestrial state, and those that have not yet been brought in as Zion spreads, right?
That's my understanding. My understanding is that depending on the state in which you find yourself, whether that be an angelic, translated, transfigured, resurrected, or mortal being, time is kept differently, or at least appears and feels different to that state of being. So essentially I could be in Jackson County, Missouri on a Friday and in China that same night within, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on being able to access portals and other things. So there's a lot that goes into it that we don't understand. There's a lot they've shown me that I do understand, and there's a lot that I don't understand. They'll show things to me, but it doesn't mean that I understand it or comprehend it right now. I just know that it is. I just have faith and know that it is because I've been able to experience some of that, not in my body and not in this realm, and then in night vision especially. And then they'll remind me of it during day vision. And so in theory, I understand it, but in practice, I don't, because I've never experienced it. I'm in a mortal body. My spirit stays in my body, and I am essentially stuck in Kansas right now, is how I feel, right? I'm stuck in Kansas, although at night, when I dream at night, I travel. And so, and I'm not doing that on purpose. I've heard about people doing things like astral projecting. My instruction from the Spirit, my guidelines have always been, when I had my NDE, they have continually told me that I am to stay in my body so that no one else can take possession of it. So when I travel at night in my dreams, that's not me willingly trying to leave, if you will. So there's a lot that goes into that. And when I have dreams, I am traveling intergalactically. I'm not just now at this point staying on the Earth. So whether that's real or figurative, or they're just teaching me through dream and vision about the possibilities, I don't know. That remains to be seen until I actually do it. But I do know that I have been able to see a lot through dream and vision, especially night vision at this point when we're talking about planetary travel or traveling to different parts of the world and things like that. I could describe to you in detail parts of what the Great China Wall looked like because I've been there so many times in dreams. So I think
That's
it's
amazing.
fascinating. I think it's the coolest thing ever.
I can actually relate to that as well. I think many people can, where they feel like they have dreams where they've been somewhere else. And I can't tell you how many times I've had dreams of this very compound that my family and extended families all live on, but it's appeared in so many different ways.
Right.
But even just last night, I traveled to a place that I thought was L.A., but in the 50s, like in the 1940s or 1950s. Just last night, it seemed like it was Los Angeles, but then I might have been confused because the topography was totally different. So, you know, and I've actually had several very visceral dreams about literally soaring in space through different galaxies and like clusters of galaxies and just instantaneously. But it brings me back to Joseph Smith and the first time that he had Angel Moroni visit his room as a boy. And in Joseph Smith's own testimony, he talks about a portal, like, well, he didn't use the word portal, but like a doorway opening up, and Angel Moroni, as the light gathered around this point, that a conduit or something where he could look into heaven, and the Angel Moroni actually walked through it into Joseph's room. Right. So I think doctrinally, you know, we have a very basic understanding, yet a pretty powerful visual of what the traveling process, or one part of the traveling process, what that can look like just from, you know, from our basic doctrines in church. And I think that's
and I find it fascinating. I've had a lot of dreams about technology in the future being enhanced. I've been shown people from other planets coming, members of the city of Enoch coming back, and other people from other planets coming, and with them bringing, you know, cool aircraft. They come in some amazing aircraft. They come and bring technology that makes our technology right now look like, you know, like centuries old. And I think that's fascinating, that there are people on other planets that are more advanced in their technologies, and they're going to bring them to Earth. We're talking about the time-space overlap. That's the verbiage given to me to try to help people understand a little bit about what happens in different realms or in different spheres as you are here on Earth and we experience things somewhere else, and what will happen in the millennium, so that essentially I could be in many different places almost all at once or very quickly, and not have someone in Africa know that I actually have a house in Idaho, or that someone in Idaho doesn't know that I have a house in New Mexico, and things like that, so that I can travel where needed to do the gathering work that I need to do missionary work, and to do whatever the Lord would have me do, to be able to be in a lot of different places, serving a lot of different people for whatever his mission requires.
You make me think of visions of glory.
Right.
When Spencer described his work, once he got to New Jerusalem, what his work was, and how he could literally be away on a mission for years, and then he would return in what seemed like only a few minutes of time elapsed from when he began.
Right.
And I find that absolutely mind-blowing. Anyway, sorry, I cut you off. I interrupted you.
That's okay. I was going to say, sorry, just a second. My daughter just needed something.
No worries.
So something, my first real experience with this, where I started understanding some of this, when I was a child, I used to dream, and we talked about this in the book a little bit, but I've always been a dreamer since I came into the world, and I had visions from when my earliest recollections. I just didn't know what to call them. I didn't know, I didn't feel like I could tell anybody. But I remember in 4th grade in Hawaii being on the island of Oahu, and I would dream that I was going to the other islands, and then and then I was actually there. And then I would have a lesson in my 4th grade class, and the teacher would teach us about one of the islands, and she'd tell us about, for instance, the leopard colony on one of the islands. And I had just dreamed that I was there visiting the leopards on that island. And so there's a lot of experience that I've had from the time I was a young girl trying to gain understanding as to how some of this works. And then when I had my NDE in 2004 and I was in the emergency room, I was in quite a bad state of mind, and I was lucid but not quite, because I had the Epstein-Barr virus attack my body, and then they later discovered I also had Lyme disease, but the Epstein-Barr virus is what actually put me into the state that I was in. And
oh boy.
I felt like I was in the emergency room for about 10 minutes. But later on, when I got out of the hospital, I asked my husband and we were talking about it. He said we were in there for like 4 to 7 hours. I can't remember how long we were actually in there, but it was at least 4 or 5 hours that we were in the emergency room before they admitted me. Time flew so quickly because my spirit was essentially detaching from my body, and I was seeing things on the other side of the veil. And for me, it felt like 10 minutes, maybe half hour at most. It flew by so quickly. Everybody else was there that was attending me, and they were concerned about me. It felt like an eternity for them, right? But for me, I was in a very happy state. I was in a good state. I was surrounded by loved ones on the other side of the veil. I was having visionary experiences. I was having such a wonderful time, and I was so calm. Even though I was sick, I was very calm. My spirit was very happy because of who was attending me, my grandma and grandpa and some other people on the other side of the veil. So I find that experience one of the most pronounced experiences that I had before I had my ND. And that was the day that I went into the hospital the first time, and that night, then later on, left my body and talked about, what I did in my book, A Greater Tomorrow. So there are going to be some people, Brandon, that will say, "Oh, she was just crazy. She's crazy. That was just her being in a psychosis." I can testify to you and to anybody listening, that's not what that was. That masked what was really going on, the real illness that was causing my spirit to detach. But we all have our spirits and we have our bodies. We have our cosmic, our auric, our ethereal, which is the spirit body, and our physical body. We actually have more bodies than that, but those are the basics of what most people understand who do what the body here on Earth. And if any one of those are not in alignment or they're out of balance, it creates problem in your system, and your spirit and your ethereal body, your spirit body, and your physical body can detach. When you're in enough pain, whether that be physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional, or mental, your spirit will often naturally detach. And my body was sick that it just kind of started, my spirit kind of slipped out of my body, if you will, but it wasn't entirely out of my body. And I think that's fascinating, right? I
can actually relate to that myself, even on relatively very minor things like either food poisoning or dehydration or just a sickness. There were times where I mean, I'm not claiming anything like specifically as far as like not authoritatively, but I do remember getting strong impressions like when I've gotten really nauseous, actually. I think that's where it's been the most noticeable, is that there are times when I've been really nauseous that I felt a sense of alarm, not because of the pain or what I was going through, but because that there was something about that. There was some type of new feeling of anxiety, and I've had this throughout my life, that I could pass out, or I could be gone, or I could somehow not be around anymore. And I didn't really think that it meant death, but it did kind of feel like my spirit would slip away. That's the best way to describe that. But I was going to say,
like an out of body experience.
Yeah. And based on what you were talking about with your your NDEs and the conditions that you were suffering through, I think, my opinion here, I think the world greatly misunderstands what people go through as far as mental illness, or even Alzheimer's, or even something as simple as a coma. I think there's a great deal of misunderstanding. I think when our Father in Heaven purpose-built this earth, right, and our lives here are also purpose-built, there's a very specific goal. And there's pretty much only one goal, and that's to receive the experience we need to know how to choose between good and evil, to choose the good from the evil, and thereby return to his presence. That's pretty much the only reason why the earth was made, is so that we could come here, and the earth could also coincidentally go through the same process, but that ultimately this would be a place for us to live eternally through this process. But I like to think that in God's perfect laboratory that he set up here for the trying of souls, so that we can gain the experience necessary to become like him, I don't think anything that happens to us, anything that we experience, whether it be a physical, a mental, or what have you, I think there's a whole lot more to what goes on than a doctor, simply from a very limited point of view, no matter how educated they may or may not be, writing it off as, oh, his brain's just not working. That just doesn't register to me.
It doesn't.
Because when you look at the grand design of this earth and why we're here and what we experience, and the Lord also knows what we need to go through ourselves. People that are born with spina bifida, people that are born with mental disorders, people that, that are born blind. I mean, they all experience what they need to experience because the Lord knows us so well, and because it adds to his perfect plan and their perfect plan individually, so that person can gain what they need to here. And so I think there's such a huge misunderstanding. I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but it's way too close-minded. I think actually just obstinate to write off anybody's experience like that and what people go through. It's so personal, and we don't have the words to describe, certain things, simple things that we experience in this life, let alone somebody that was born with a very severe mental illness and was never able to speak. And we have sophisticated multi-million-dollar equipment to try to measure their brain activity, this, that, and the other, but what that person is actually experiencing, we have no idea. Science cannot explain it. At least the science we have on this earth right now. Exactly. But you know who knows exactly what they're going through? The Lord knows. He knows. And it keeps coming back to that.
And I appreciate that, Brian. That leads me into my health issues because I don't have anything to hide. The adversary tried to make me afraid to tell people my story since I came to this earth, and he's really tried to invoke fear upon me since 2004, telling me time and time and time again and sending lots of his messengers to haunt me and to badger me and to beat me up, trying to tell me through thought messages and other ways that if I were to go public with my story, people would just think I'm crazy, and even so far as lock me up. I mean, the experiences and the extent to which they've tried to do that, what that has done initially, it did invoke fear, but then as I've worked through that, I realized it's motivated me to share more with my story and to let people know that I don't have anything to hide, and that there is a lot more, there is so much more that comes into play with mental illness or any other physical or mental or emotional effects on the body. And I've actually, when I had my NDE, in my book, I talk about how hard it was for me to come back. And there are a lot of reasons why it was hard for me to come back. And one of the biggest reasons I had a hard time coming back was because they spelled it out to me what my health issues were going to be. They told me that I was going to come back with mental illness. And I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I have memories of putting my hands in my face, sitting in a room after I was shown the window of heaven, and I sat in a room. They gave me some time to myself, and I had my hands in my lap, then hands on my face, with my eyes covered, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because I didn't want to cause pain to anyone else, and I didn't want to have to go through the pain, even though I understood that I had agreed to it, Brandon. I did not want to face the pain and the anguish of the physical pain I was going to go through or the mental pain. I have dealt with a lot of physical pain, but I can tell you that mental illness is more painful to me than some of the worst physical pain I've been through. And to come back to a body after experiencing no pain, and then to come back to a body that I knew was going to be very sick was almost more than I could bear. And then just the thought of what people were going to say about me or say to me or how they're going to be treated, and knowing that it was going to be at least 9 years before I would get to tell my story, and not even having my husband or other people close to me believe me, and them telling me that that was going to be the case, that I would come back and not have a single soul that I could talk to about this for a long time on a real in-depth level. And
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that in of itself was painful on the other side of the veil, to think that I was going to do that. But then they reminded me of what I committed to premortally. They reminded me of the benefits that would come in going through that. They promised me amazing blessings. They promised me amazing blessings in my life, but after. And one of those amazing blessings was to be able to convert souls to Christ. They reminded me of my love for the Savior and how much I wanted to be with Him. How much I wanted to be with Him. How much I love my Father in heaven, and how much I want to be with my Savior, and how much I know other people, while they don't remember it, want to be with Him. And I then and there resolved that I was going to just get it together, pull it together, and that I would go ahead and go back, as in come back to my body, get back to earth, and do what I had committed to do premortally, and do what I knew was right, which was to warn and testify and to tell people how much I love them, to tell people how much I love the Lord, and that I committed to do whatever I needed to do to bring as many people home, because this is the time of the gathering. And that is why I do this, Brandon, because I know, and I believe, and I remember, and it wasn't a figment of my imagination. And what has happened to me since waking up, and all of the adversarial attacks and all of the opposition, and on the opposite side of that, all of the blessings and the joy and the tremendous spiritual intervention that has occurred to keep me alive, to heal my body, to help me get up and go again after I get hit hard. There are no words for that. And the more I go along in this process, and the longer it goes, and the closer we get to the tribulation starting, and as we go into the tribulations, the more convinced I am that I absolutely made the right choice, and that no price is too great to pay to return to Father in heaven and to return to the Savior. And if I can do that, and I can be successful in that, and I can help others be successful in that, then I have considered the job well done, and I know that the promises He's given me are going to come to fruition. And one of the things I was promised was complete healing one day, that no matter how much pain and anguish of mind, body, and spirit I would endure, that one day I would have an entirely new body, whole and complete, without pain. And then when that part of my mission is over, I get to travel the world, and later on travel to other places and do missionary work. And that is what brings me joy.
I can definitely add that my life and everybody within my sphere of influence is, I would like to add our names to the list of souls that you've brought closer to Christ. I definitely know that through hearing your testimony, I have absolutely felt so much closer to the Savior. I have felt them feeling after me in ways that I had always suspected, but had never realized until that time. So I just wanted to thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the work you do with our organization, and I appreciate your testimony and your witness and your questions today. I think we'll wrap it up here for a few minutes. I just want to turn it over to Eric and see if you have anything you wanted to add, Eric.
Well, it's been really fun to be a fly on the wall in this conversation. I'm pretty content where I am. I've had a number of thoughts, but I think we can let those go until another podcast.
Okay. Well, I just appreciate both of you. I'm thankful for your friendship, for your strength, your witness, and your testimonies, and I look forward to doing another podcast with both of you.
Yeah,
That's all, folks.